Hi there. Welcome to this episode of the podcast Top SCR Nuggets. My name is Tushar Johri, and I'm the proud owner of this LinkedIn community that is dedicated in helping you clear your GARP SCR exam. I've given the link of this LinkedIn community in the description of this video. For this episode, I reached out to one of our community member. Her name is Kritika Chandrasekar. Kritika is a banking veteran and is based in Singapore. Kritika has always been passionate about the subject of sustainability, and she, like any other community member, has been always forthcoming in sharing her experiences and learning with others. During the discussion, I asked Kritika as to what strategy did she adopt for clearing her exam in the first go. During the discussion, Kritika shared the details about her preparation strategy. Also, the kind of challenges that she faced at the initial stages of the preparation. How did she overcome? How did she practice? And how did she prepare herself for the exam? She has shared all these details in this particular episode. I would request you to watch this episode right till the end and then pick up those tips and techniques that are being shared by Kritika. I'm sure you're excited to listen to Kritika. So why don't we just go over and start a discussion with Kritika?
Welcome, Kritika. Welcome to this episode of this podcast. I know it is late, but I'm glad that you agreed to become part of this episode. I'm sure through the conversation that we are going to have in this podcast, your own journey of preparation for this exam, GARP SCR exam, is going to inspire a lot many people, and I'm sure they will pick up some really good pointers that will help them in preparing better for the GARP SCR exam. Now, before we get headlong into the conversation about the preparation and more details about GARP SCR exam, I would request if you can give a little background about yourself and where are you joining from, and then we can continue from that point onwards.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you, Tushar, for this opportunity. You have been doing exemplary work in helping every potential GARP SCR candidate with your perspective, advice, and knowledge. And it's only, befitting that now I, having passed this exam, also, carry it through. I am actually from Singapore. It's late at night, as you mentioned at the beginning of the call. But this is the perfect time to have this podcast.
Right.
My training has been in the field of banking and finance. So I graduated postgraduate degree in banking and finance. I have been working with banks ever since. So I started my career in India. And in banking and finance, I specialize in risk management.
Okay.
So my background been in market risk management, operational risk management. While I was in India, I was also doing asset liability management.
Right.
Then married and I moved to the US. And in US, also I was in the same line, but this was as a consultant in the risk management and financial service advisory space, where I was advising a $600 billion client on if you're aware, the Bank for International Settlements has different accords called Basel Accords, and
Yes,
basically specify how much capital adequacy banks need to have with themselves to account for any unforeseen risk that they might encounter in their credit lending activities or in their market risk related activities, which is dealing in markets,
right.
or in their operational activities.
Right.
So in the US, I was consulting in risk management. Then I had a hiatus wherein I was dedicating time to my family. I was in Switzerland at this point of time.
Okay.
From Switzerland, my family moved to Singapore, and then I again went back in the same field. But this, but there was slight pivot towards audit and compliance.
Mm-hmm.
So before I have been working in audit and internal audit and compliance, but with a risk perspective.
I see.
And this was a global role, and while working in this role, I also sort of, I mean, it was pretty nascent, like about 3 or 4 years ago,
Right.
but climate risk, sustainability, lending to clients that are seen, co- conscientious about ESG and sustainable investing practices,
Right.
was a very and was a very serious issue for the bank. And
Right.
naturally, as risk management professionals, we would need to make sure that banks and lending activities are aligned with that.
I see.
So, in a nutshell, my background has been in banking and finance, risk management in particular, and
Right.
towards the more recent stage of my career, it has been in audit,
Okay.
but from a risk perspective.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kritika. Thank you for that background. Now coming to GARP SCR, although you touched upon it, but how did you hear about this particular certification on GARP SCR, and why did you decide to take it up?
So I was at that stage when I was preparing for the GARP SCR. I was looking to pivot into something that is more purpose driven, into something that helped me combine my professional skills, my analytical skills, auditing skills, but at the same time have like a bigger, greater, a more holistic purpose, which is made me think about sustainability. But sustainability, as you would be knowing, is sometimes too broad an umbrella.
Correct.
Because anything and everything does come under the umbrella of sustainability. But specific to my background and specific to my skills, I wanted to concentrate on climate risk more, because that's a risk, even though it is still quite ambiguous. Correct. Right now. True. That's a risk that is very potent for like banking institutions or financial institutions, for that matter, or any kind of manufacturing institution. True. I was looking to pivot into this area, but I wasn't really how to go ahead with it. Where when a colleague suggested the CFA ESG exam, actually. But then when I did research and when I did my reading, I found that the CFA ESG is more catered towards investing practices and investment solutions that are more catered to, say, a portfolio manager or, say, an analyst, working in that field, rather than a risk manager. So the GARP SCR is more catered to like individuals that assess risk, that identify, assess, and provide for risks in like all sorts of institutions, be it financial, be it manufacturing, which is why I got interested in the first place, because it was literally combining my professional skills with something that I was like interested in and like passionate pivot into. So between the SCR and the CFA ESG, I chose the SCR because that's more suited to my needs, and that's where I want to move forward with.
Super, because I think while you were mentioning it, you also explained, because we get a lot of questions from the aspirants about which one to choose from. The GRP and SFA, and they're in the same boat, because they have a confusion whether they should go for CFA ESG or GRP SCR, and you very beautifully explained as to how they should choose, because it totally depends on their work profile as well as to what are they currently working on, and which certificate will really add value to their either the current profile or maybe whatever they are planning to do in near future. So that really that also I'm sure it will help a lot to a lot of people. Coming to now GRP SCR exam preparation. So you had your exam in October 2023. And so maybe I'll take you back to the point where you registered for the exam, and then your journey from that point onwards. So when did you actually register for the exam, and After that, after registering for it, what is the high level strategy that you prepared? What kind of schedule did you prepare, etc., etc.? So maybe if you can walk us through that journey.
Okay, so I came, like I said, I was looking for a pivot,
Right.
and mentor actually recommended the CFA ESG. But then, while researching for the CFA ESG, I came across the GARP SCR.
Right.
So I would have, I mean, I don't remember the exact dates, but I probably registered early in September to give the exam in October,
Right.
and the website recommends a preparation time of about 100 to 130 hours.
Correct.
So I think, I think in the beginning itself, I was conscious that, I have like a good solid 45 days for preparation.
Right.
And there be consistency in these 45 days. Otherwise, I can like easily let the ball slide off my court.
Correct.
So that's how I started. So I was cognizant of the fact that I need to put in an hour or two at least every day.
Right.
It wasn't continuous. We all have jobs. We are all
Correct.
working full time. We have families and households to take care of. But at a minimum, what I did for myself was an hour in the morning,
Okay.
and an hour late at night if that was possible. I did start with reading the entire book.
Right.
So I would go at chapter by chapter, and I'm a bit of a, I'm a bit of a reading buff. So reading the material didn't exactly put me off. So that part I went quite consistently. So I would read the entire chapter.
Right.
And but here's the thing. So SCR candidates are given the entire book by GARP, which has 8 chapters. It had 8 chapters for us. I don't know in 2024 April whether the chapters have changed or not, but we had 8 chapters. The exam guide also sort of gives you an idea about what is the weightage of each chapter, and in a very broad level what each chapter encompasses.
Right.
But the questions at the end of the chapter are quite basic. Like, even with basic reading, you would probably get most of those questions correctly.
Right.
So that part I struggled a bit because, I did do the reading and I did understand most of the concepts, but this lack of tests, and I'm sure whenever anybody is appearing for an exam, just giving those mock tests is also like it's a confidence booster, or it can tell you where you stand.
That's
just
correct.
Simple really doesn't put you on the trajectory of being fully prepared.
True.
So that's where your blog came into the picture. So I joined your blog on LinkedIn, and then I found that there are chapter-wise questions.
Right.
So what I would do is I would first read the chapter, and I would. So do I go into more details? So because I used to make notes as well.
That's fine.
For example, like chapter 2, which deals with sustainable development goals.
Correct.
So I would make most of the goals so that I could easily recollect.
Right.
Chapter 2, chapter 4, which deals with financial markets in the field of sustainability, and chapter 5 that deals with sustainable marketable instruments like green bonds or sustainable. That's quite theoretical in nature.
Correct.
But the book gives a lot of real life examples of how companies like Chanel or Schneider Electric or a BlackRock are using these sustainable investments to make their portfolio.
Correct.
So then so I would read the chapters thoroughly, and then I would look to your blog for answering the questions.
Right.
I still have my scoring pattern in my diary as I'm speaking to you. So the first time I would take those questions, I wouldn't score more than 4 on 10 or 5 on 10. And I was like, I read the whole chapter. How can I score so ably?
Right.
But then that's the cincher, or that's the deal about this exam, is because it is multiple choice.
Correct.
These questions really make you think. Like every question, there would be 2 options that would almost fit the bill. So you really need to be very well read, first of all, and very well aware, and you really need to understand the concepts very well, if I
Correct.
can say that.
Right.
Using the word too many times, but you get the gist, right?
Right.
So answering the questions, scoring poorly, and then retaking the test really helped me. And also at the end of each chapter questions, you would have like a feedback portion,
Right.
wherein you would like ask that, what went wrong, or, what did you find difficult, or what did you find easy, like that. That also sort of gives you like a judgment criteria on like, how well your understanding is and
Correct.
where you need.
Right.
So that's how I went about chapter by chapter.
Nice.
I would advise though that the GARP SCR website also gives like a mock test paper.
Right.
And I felt taking that mock test in the midst of my preparation and not leaving it to the bag and actually helped me, because even in that mock test, I didn't score that well. But it sort of gave me an idea of, what my strong points were, which chapters were my strong points, like, the climate risk measurement chapter, which is chapter 6.
Correct.
Scenario analysis, chapter 3, which deals with different types of climate risk. When I took that mock test, sort of suggest that those were my strong points.
Right.
And rest of the chapters were where I needed to concentrate more on.
Right.
So taking the chapter test that you had designed were quite helpful with my preparation.
I'm glad to know that, Kritika. But I think there are 2-3 points. I think very interesting, very, very interesting points that came up. I think one was taking the mock test in the middle of your preparation. That also, in a way that helped you understand the kind of questions that you can expect and what kind of questions are going to come. It probably gives you a little direction on to what depth you should be studying those chapters, so that you get that kind of confidence to tackle the kind of questions which are given in the actual mock paper which is provided by GRP. So
I did take after finishing like one round of reading of all the chapters.
Oh, okay. All right. And a few things on, you mentioned about taking notes, right? So that is something that I would also want to understand from you, because see, everybody has a different way of taking notes while they are going through the chapters, right? What kind of notes did you take? Were these only text notes, or did you try to picture something? Did you try to tabulate or any other way, so that you, while revising, you are able to recollect that information quickly, so that you can revise effectively? And especially when there's so much content, right? So there should be a way that an individual should adopt, so that he or she is able to recollect that information very quickly. So what kind of notes did you make? Do you recollect that?
Yeah, so mostly, like I said, chapters that were quite theoretical in nature. Mnemonics helped me. For example, like there are 17 SDG, Sustainable Development.
Right.
So I had a for that mnemonic, as in like a small word where each letter would denote like which goal,
right,
which of the 17 goals there is. Again, mnemonics helped, especially in chapter 4 or chapter 5, wherein there are different green bond principles and sustainability linked loan principles, which are universally accepted.
Correct.
So helped in this case also. And, as was exemplified in the exam that we took in October,
right.
Really pick on these principles, give you like, scenarios or situations where these principles would be applied, and then they leave it to the discretion, then they leave it to the candidate to actually answer like which principle would fit which of the bond and which instrument would fit the principle and vice versa. The mnemonics really helped in cases of chapters that were quite theoretical. For chapters which required a lot of understanding, or getting your concepts right, in that pictorial representation helped more. For example, chapter 6,
right,
that with how climate risks is climate risk makes its way to different kinds of risks like credit or market or operational insurance or liquidity for that matter.
Right.
And as an organization in enterprise-wide management, you would incorporate and show climate risk to your board or to your clients or your shareholders or whatever. In this diagram, or well, not exactly diagrams, flow charts helped. Because even this book, the way it is structured, there's a very seamless flow to the chapters, in the sense that chapter 1 actually introduces what is climate risk to you.
Correct.
Talks about sustainability. So if you're clear on chapter 2, chapter 4 and chapter 5 would be a natural segue from that. And chapter 3, which is like the most fundamental, which talks about the different kinds of climate risk, how different kinds of institutions can stand to be affected by climate risk in the future, and what are the different operandi or tools and mechanisms that you would use this climate risk. So chapter 3 again provides a natural segue to chapter 6 and chapter 7. If you have this like a flowchart manner that, this is the risk, it can lead to like, A or B. If it's A, then what's the what's the addressal mechanism, and if it's B, what's the addressal mechanism? So that made it more clear in my mind. It also sort of helped that I am from the same same background. So like, this is how we account, identify, assess, and like prioritize risks.
Perfect.
So flowcharts help, mnemonic helped, and then of course text help. Like, yeah.
Good. That's really, really insightful. I think so. Kritika, to further our discussion. So what I also wanted to know as to what kind of material did you refer for the preparation? Did you read any extra material that is prescribed by GRP apart from the book, or anything else?
Well, as we were talking before the call, Tushar, the material for the GARP SCR is really limited to the book that they publish. So yeah, my main source was the book. Plus, GARP SCR also recommends certain required readings. So I did go through them, but that was at the far end of my preparation, maybe a fortnight before the actual exam. I did give the readings a look through, and it was quite beneficial actually. And I'll come to that in a bit.
Sure.
As regards extra reading, I didn't do extra reading, but concepts that I was struggling with, which the book wasn't very self-explanatory on. For example, I'm forgetting the concept now, but basically you had explained it in the blog. So, why are Arctic ice belts like reflect
albedo effect?
Albedo effect. Albedo effect. That wasn't explained quite well in the book. I mean, it was mentioned, but it wasn't quite explained well. And in the mock paper, there were around a couple of questions around that. So I needed, explanation on that. And for that, my go-to was the blog and the articles that you had shared on that. Another example is basic and basic plus. So the book does explain what is basic and which kind of scope 1, scope 2 emissions are included in basic. And just for people listening to the podcast, basic and basic plus is how you account for your carbon emissions, and how companies show these numbers. And basic plus is a modified or a more inclusive form of basic, though the book mentions these concepts, but it's quite ambiguous. So there again, I needed extra help. But I mean, if you search the internet for it, there's a plethora of information that can only confuse you more. So for these concepts also, my go-to was your blog, and you had shared a couple of not only articles but also a couple of worked out examples, which were quite helpful for me to understand the concept finally.
Great. Good. So I'm glad it helped. So so to summarize, I think your main focus was the book. You referred to anything extra only to understand those concepts in a better way, which you thought or which you found that the information was not sufficient or the explanation was not very descriptive in the book, and that is where
Yeah.
you try to do a little bit of research outside the book.
Yeah. Also, another point on the
Hmm?
required readings that the website mentions,
Right.
though these are quite verbose in nature, I mean, there are
Hmm.
several pages on just principles of
True.
responsible banking,
Correct.
but some of these readings actually whet your knowledge more on
Right.
like the topics that are already covered in the
Hmm.
main book.
Okay.
So, like I mentioned, principles of responsible banking. As people in the financial services industry, most of them would be aware of such
Hmm.
principles because they are quite intuitive in nature. But
Right.
just having them, in bullet point form, in principle form, sort of like gives you a better understanding. Same for principles of responsible investment.
Right.
Then there was an article on task force on climate related financial
Correct.
disclosures.
Right.
So, though the book talks about it, there's an article that talks more in detail about it. So,
Okay.
what I want to summarize is the
Hmm.
required readings, which every candidate should do
Oh, right.
before the exam.
Hmm.
The required readings sort of complement the subject matter that is already dealt with in the book.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, like for concepts that are totally alien, that
Hmm.
were totally alien for me, like this basic plus
Right.
accounting, PhD
Right.
accounting, and all. Yeah, I had to look for sources
All right.
outside of the book and the required readings.
Right. But in general, Kritika, as per your experience, so these extra readings either can go along with the chapter, or maybe towards the, once you have finished the book and you want to still revise or
Mm.
refresh, what do you suggest? Or should we keep it so that, the idea is then people should actually focus on the book, ensure that they finish the book, and then they, whatever time that they have, then they can devote that time to maybe going through some selected extra readings? Or do you suggest that they, while they are doing the chapter, you keep on reading these extra material which is prescribed?
I don't know, Tushar, at the task cost of digging my own grave. I mean, first you read the chapter in the book, plus you do the required reading, it gets to be a bit much.
Much, yeah.
So, like I said, what I did was I had read through the entire book once.
Right.
Then I started answering tests. Then I did the mock test.
Right.
Then I did another round of revision. This time,
Right.
when I did the round of revision, then
Right.
I also looked at the required readings.
Correct. So, do you recollect as to, how many revisions did you do for the book, Kritika?
Well, full-fledged one revision.
Right.
Full-fledged one revision. But like I said, when I would answer the test, I would score badly.
Yeah.
Which made me sort of like, go back and like, revise that
Revise
particular
again.
concept or that particular portion again. So these
Right.
kind of iterations were multiple during my preparation.
Well,
And I think it stood me in good stead. Like, not that I'm, looking at this opportunity to give myself a pat on my own back, but like other candidates would know, and potential candidates, GARP also gives you like a performance analysis of your performance chapter by chapter. Like they pit your performance in like a bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly my performance has been in good and excellent.
Perfect.
Paradoxically, the only one in which I got fair was like the most basic chapter, which is chapter 3, which is like you really need to have your fundamentals very strong for that.
Right.
But yeah, I fair in that.
But that's really a good score overall, Kritika. So, congrats.
Thank you, thank you.
So, while going through the book, were there any chapters which you found difficult or less interesting in a way that you have to put some extra efforts to understand what is mentioned in the book? What do you recollect any chapters like that?
Yeah, so chapter 7, scenario analysis. My background is in risk management, but something that is very quantitative immediately puts me off.
Okay.
So when I first read that chapter on scenario analysis, and there are so many permutations, combinations that go towards designing a scenario,
Correct.
it put me off. But once I actually read through the chapter,
Right.
let's just say I didn't struggle with the concepts. And even in the exam that happened in October, a lot of the questions, in fact, a majority, not a majority, but a good weightage of questions were around scenario analysis, which links to like, your concepts, like,
Right.
which kind of scenario you would use if like you perceive physical climate risk to be a bigger danger
Right.
than say a transition climate risk or something like that.
Oh, nice.
So chapter 7, I went with the bias that it would be quantitative, but not really. It's quite doable for anybody. Chapter 8, I still struggle with because chapter 8 deals with the concept of net zero. Net zero in terms of the institutions and the players that are already implementing net zeros, the policies around net zero, the EU taxonomy, all that is quite understandable.
Right.
But I struggled with questions or concepts around how you would calculate the emissions of say a non-national actor like a city,
Correct.
or an industry like a shipping industry or like a
Right.
cement industry. So I really struggle with those concepts, and I still wouldn't say that I'm ace level at that. No.
Really? Okay.
Lastly, the first chapter, there are a lot of questions around that chapter as well, which gives the introduction to climate risk.
Correct.
On the surface, it looks to be an easy chapter, but like I said, the questions that come in the exam, even in the mock test, even in your chapter analysis questions, um, the questions do require a lot of thinking, and the questions do require for you to be aware of a multitude of concepts and then apply them to get to the answer.
Right, indeed. Yeah, I think that is really a good information, Kritika. So now coming to the practice part of it, right? So you also mentioned, that you took up mock papers and then other material as well. Apart from the mock papers and the questions that are given in the book, did you find any other material on the net, or did you subscribe to anything else that you could practice?
Your blog.
Okay.
I mean, not the LinkedIn group. I joined the LinkedIn group, but you have a specific blog that deals with like chapter-wise some concepts in every chapter, and then there's like a short 10 questions test for every chapter. Yeah, that really helped because, like I said, over the net, like there isn't really any training material for this.
Great, good. All right. So now coming to the exam, did you prepare anything while practicing, while going through the mock papers? Did you prepare any specific strategy for the exam that, for example, you would tackle these questions one by one in a sequence, or anything that, any strategies that you prepared for the exam?
Well, actually, no, Tushar, and I would look to hear your advice or your perspective on whether candidates should have a strategy. I did have a strategy for the preparation, like I told you, and I have spoken about. But for the exam per se, I just took each question as it came. I was cognizant of the fact that most of these questions really are analytical in nature. There isn't going to be like an obvious answer to like every question.
True.
Most questions would have like two options which clearly fit the bill, but then there is only one right answer. So I took the exam answering each and every question while being cognizant of like really reading, rereading, and like then giving my choice. But other than that, if you have any advice for strategy, that would be for you to give.
Yeah, I mean, I normally suggest that in an exam, in any exam, not only GRPS here, any competitor exam, there will be few questions which will really challenge you, right? And at that time, we should keep our ego aside If you're not able to, answer the question in a per unit time that you have set, then just move on and then come back to it later.
Yeah.
And especially now, there's no negative marking in the exam, so you can just flag few questions, and towards the end, keep some time so that you take the best guess, and then ensure that you are at least answering all the questions and none of the questions are left unattempted or unanswered. So this
Yeah.
is, but everybody, while you're preparing and you know your strengths well, everybody tends to have their own strategy on, answering
Correct.
their exam. So
In fact, the exam also gives you the option of flagging a question and like coming back to it. So
correct.
that mechanism should definitely be used by everybody.
Correct. Now, another one is the next question is more interesting. Kritika, if you recall your first 15-20 minutes of starting the exam, do you recollect? Did it go very well? You were getting all the questions. What? No.
No, not at all.
Right.
The first 15 minutes actually were quite intimidating because, like I said, I had invested about 100 to 130 hours of preparation for this exam. I had also done a round of revision. I had like done mock tests and so on. But the first 15 minutes were intimidating in the sense that, like I mentioned before, like each question, especially on chapter 1 and chapter 3, are all taking a concept and applying it to like real life scenarios. Like what would this company do, or what would the analyst recommend, which requires a lot of analytical thinking on your part also.
Correct.
And you're never really sure that the answer that you are thinking is right. Is the actual right one. So when this happens in the beginning of the paper, it tends to get a little intimidating as well as demoralizing, which happened to me.
Okay.
But once I got into the rhythm of like tackling each question, and like you said, keeping the ego aside and like soldiering on, things got a little better.
Good.
And the entire 180 minutes that we get for answering those 80 questions, at least for me, I was just left with about 10 minutes at hand at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important because I think, Kritika, as you mentioned, especially when you get some really tough questions at the start of the exam, it is really difficult to calm yourself, to collect yourself, and then keep moving forward and ensure that you don't lose that confidence, so that you are able to really think through the next few questions and then pass through. So it's really commendable that how you keep yourself collected during those first 10-15 minutes, because that is where either you gain confidence or you tend to lose confidence. So that's why these first 10-15 minutes are really crucial in any exam.
And even if you are losing confidence, you still soldier on, like you have the rest of the paper.
Correct. So I think I normally suggest people that even I tell them upfront that in the exam you will definitely get a sequence of questions which will tend to dip your confidence. So at that time, if you suddenly start finding that you are not getting the question one after the another, leave that group, and then maybe start from the back or go to the middle of the question paper, try to see if you're able to get. So the entire distribution in these exams as well, that they keep the tougher questions maybe at either the start or the end, especially at the start, and then maybe simpler ones in the middle or at the end. So just in case if you face a situation, leave 10 questions and move forward and see if it really helps.
Yeah,
Good.
that completely makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned that you still had 10 minutes to spare by the time you finished your paper.
Yeah, but I wanted to reiterate the fact that the 180 minutes that we get for these 80 questions are like fully utilized. I mean, you do need to think that much, and you do need to like analyze, recollect, recall, and then
correct, and probably revisit the questions as well.
Revisit your flagged questions. Yeah.
Good. So when you came out of the examination hall, what was your confidence, Kritika?
Well, so my husband very fondly puts it that as a risk professional, sort of in my life, I have gotten used to, like, the fact that things can go wrong, kind of,
Right.
attitude. So let's just say I wasn't supremely confident that the exam went well,
Right.
but I was also assured of the fact that the my way of analyzing the questions,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't very different from when I was doing the mock. It wasn't very different from when I was understanding the
Right.
concepts.
Okay.
So at least on that part, I was confident that the answers that I have given could
Mm-hmm.
not have been anything else.
Oh,
So on
perfect.
that part, on that part, I didn't have doubt.
Right.
But like I said, the exam is hard. It has a 50% pass rate. So, I wasn't supremely confident that, things went all hunky dory.
All right. Okay. Good to know. All right. We are almost towards the end of this podcast, Kritika. The purpose for which you took up this exam. Do you think it whatever you have learned or this how this certification really helped you and did it meet your objectives of taking this exam after all?
So I'll divide your question into three parts, right? So
Okay.
first, did it meet my objective of like taking the exam in the first place? My
Mm-hmm.
objective was to actually pivot into an area, of finance,
Correct.
that I was interested in. That's still very nascent at this
Mm-hmm.
stage.
Mm-hmm.
So from that objective, the concepts dealt with in this particular certification
Right.
are really what analysts or risk managers or even like people who make decisions for like lending or
Right.
investing or risk management. It's quite up there in terms of like knowledge. So it definitely fulfill that objective of mine.
Right.
I also said that the way the curriculum is structured, wherein
Mm-hmm.
each chapter provides a segue to the other topic,
Right.
and the other topic like explains it further,
Mm-hmm.
and then every chapter concludes with like in real life what companies are doing, what investing firms are doing.
Right.
So in terms of the one-to-one correlation between what you're studying and what is taking place in the marketplace,
Mm-hmm.
the one-to-one correlation is completely there.
Right.
In terms of opportunities, so this, correct me if I'm wrong, Tushar, but GARP SCR was introduced in 2021, right?
Somewhere around
Or
that time.
2020?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still, the recognition for this certificate
Mm-hmm.
is still nascent. So
Right.
I'll talk specific to my background.
Mm-hmm.
So in risk management, climate risk is a very talked about subject,
Correct.
and there aren't many professionals who are completely cognizant or completely conversant or completely at ease
Okay.
with budgeting for climate risk
Mm-hmm.
in your risk management processes and controls.
Right.
So somebody already in the field,
Mm-hmm.
and if they do this certificate, it's like I wouldn't say that it's an added feather in your cap. No, that's like sort of
Mm-hmm.
dissing the subject.
Okay.
But it definitely upskills you in not only in terms of knowledge but also in terms of capability for like providing for the subject matter.
Correct.
But if somebody is looking to pivot into
Mm-hmm.
this line of
Mm-hmm.
work, which is into
Correct.
and analyzing sustainable investment
Mm-hmm.
and analyzing climate risk. Uh, Again, the certificate is a great starting point, but then it
Right.
has to be complemented with like the person being willing to, I guess, start at grassroots level
Correct.
for a career pivot. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. You very rightly put, because I think generally the expectation is, GRP, SCR, although it's an internationally recognized certificate, I normally tend to set the expectation for people that it is not overnight going to, it's not a magic
Yeah.
wand that, suddenly find a lot of opportunities coming your way just because you have completed
Yeah.
a certification, right? So it has to be complemented by the kind of work that you're trying to do. It is so that is, it's like a complementary thing. It cannot be treated in isolation, but it has to be complemented with the kind of work that you're trying to do. So
absolutely, very crudely putting, it's not an MBA that's gonna get you placed in like an organization. It's an upskill that you're doing for yourself and for your career trajectory.
Absolutely. All right. The last question, Kritika. Any 5 tips for the people who are preparing for the GARP SCR exam, as per your
5
experience?
tips from my end, especially when I told you like the first 15 minutes were like so intimidating. I don't think I'm in a position for giving tips, but still, if I had to like offer my perspective, then of course the first is preparation. It's not simply enough like reading, because we are all like I mean, some of us are really freshers, like some of us are, doing this course in college or after college, but most of us are seasoned professionals. So, retention is a tricky issue. So just reading won't do. Revision definitely matters, and a particular strategy in revising matters.
Right.
Then what helped me more was giving these mock tests.
Right.
The more the more you test yourself, the more aware you become of where you need help and which area you need to concentrate more on.
Right.
Another tip, especially in giving the exam, during the exam, like you mentioned, is not to get fixated on a particular set of questions and not to get like harangued by the fact that like I cannot do this, or I don't know this, and especially if I had studied for this.
Right.
Have the patience to first of all read again, and if you still are struggling, then soldier on to the next question.
True.
What else? Pace yourself. Like what helped me in university was like end minute cramming up, which like mostly stood me in stead, but not for this exam, and not when we are professionals, and not when we have so many things to juggle. Then a consistent approach, like I said, at least for me, I invested an hour in the morning and an hour in the night, and towards the end of towards when I edged closer to the exam date, then I put in like more than 2 hours a day.
Right.
But a consistent study approach really helped me.
Indeed, I think you're very right, and because I've interacted with few people who have studied, or at least their strategy was to study weekend to weekend. That did not really help them, because I think the content is so much, because if the next weekend you will forget as to what you did on the previous week.
Goes.
Yeah, so consistency is very, very important, as you rightly put. So I think that really brings us to the end of this episode, and I'm sure there's a lot of information and very useful information that you have shared, and I'm sure a lot of people will get inspired by the way that you prepared, how you overcame the nervousness and the difficulties that you were facing, and then you pass successfully. So I think that's what also really matters, and that too with really flying colors. So I'm sure a lot of people will take very important information away from this discussion. So thank you, Kritika.
The pleasure was all mine, Tushar. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I feel that you're being extra kind to me. What you're doing, especially around the time that I took the exam, and all the other candidates that took the exam with me who were part of that LinkedIn group, each and every question that you answered, and your availability and your accessibility is like really above par. I hope you continue to help the other future candidates in the same manner, and any help that you require from us candidates, like I said at the beginning of the call, more than happy to give.
Well, you have been really generous and really kind. So we'll be in touch, and thank you again for your time, Kritika.
Thank you, Tushar. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good day.